In a snow-covered Maine harbor, a quiet police sergeant heard scratching inside a frozen yacht. What he found below deck was not evidence, not yet. Just a German shepherd too weak to stand. But the dog's scratched name tag pointed to a fisherman the marina claimed had simply walked away. Then the dog trembled beside one luxury yacht, as if the cold metal still remembered what people wanted erased. The sergeant had spent a year avoiding the world, but this time, walking away would mean letting another man disappear. What began as a rescue became a test of loyalty, truth, and the courage to ask for help before it was too late. Share your own interesting, touching story with an animal you love, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. The first snow of the season made Frost Harbor look kinder than it was. By dawn, every dock line wore a sleeve of ice. The old marina sat under a clean white covering, its expensive winterized yachts wrapped in canvas and shrink film, quiet as sleeping houses on dark water. The harbor itself did not sleep. It breathed under the boards, pushing black tide through the pilings, lifting and lowering the boats with a patience older than any man who had ever tried to own them. Sergeant Leif Arlen Winslow stood at the open door of the town boatworks and watched the storm lighten into morning. The building behind him had once smelled of cedar shavings, varnish, hot coffee, and men arguing over the right way to repair a hull. Now it smelled of damp rope, cold metal dust, and the kerosene heater he kept near the workbench. The town still owned the place, technically. Years ago, before the marina began courting wealthier clients and polishing its public face, local fishermen had brought their boats here for patched seams and winter work. Then the budget dried up. The roof sagged. The tools vanished one by one. The boatworks became a liability no one wanted to discuss at meetings. Leif had agreed to keep an eye on it through winter. That was the official version. The truth was simpler and harder to say. He stayed there because the building asked nothing from him. It did not call him for dinner. It did not leave voicemails. It did not look at him with the careful pity people offered when they remembered the fog rescue last February and the empty chair it had left at the docks. He was 44, tall and athletic, in the way of a man who still trained because stopping felt like surrender. His shoulders filled out the dark navy police parka he wore over his uniform. Snow had collected along the brim of his black watch cap, and the wind had reddened the light tan skin across his cheekbones. His face was angular, marked by weather more than age, with sharp blue-gray eyes that seemed to measure distance before emotion. His dark brown hair was cut short in a police style, though the top had begun to grow uneven from too many mornings under a winter hat. Very short stubble shaded his jaw. On his left wrist, beneath the edge of his glove, he wore a black round-faced watch with a small crack at the rim of the glass. He touched that crack whenever he caught himself remembering, so he did not touch it now. The nor'easter had come in after midnight, dragging snow sideways across Frost Harbor and driving water under docks that had survived worse storms by complaining loudly and holding fast. Leif had spent most of the night moving between the boatworks and the outer slips, checking lines, calling in a damaged power box, warning one foolish owner from Boston not to come down and personally assess a yacht in 50-mile-an-hour gusts. Near 5 in the morning, the worst of the wind began to weaken. Leif zipped his parka higher, took his flashlight from the bench, and stepped into the snow. His boots sank with a soft crunch. The marina lights made yellow circles in the white air. Beyond them, the VIP slips glowed brighter than the rest of the harbor. Blue-white security lights shining over polished railings and covered decks. Even in winter, the wealthy boats seemed to expect admiration. Leif turned away from them and walked toward the older side of the marina, where the abandoned craft sat waiting for spring, sail, or decay. The Laurel Belle was moored at the far end of Sea Dock, half forgotten under a torn winter cover. Once she must have been a handsome cruiser. Now her name was faded gold on the stern, and ice had thickened along her lower rail. One corner of the cover had come loose in the storm and snapped lazily against the cabin window. Leif almost passed her. Then he heard it. Not the cover, not ice falling, not a loose halyard tapping a mast. A scrape, small, weak, repeated. He stopped. The harbor moved around him. Water knocked softly under the dock. A gull cried somewhere beyond the snow. A flag rope clicked against a pole near the marina office. Leif held still and listened past all of it. There, another scrape, then a pause, then two more, fainter than before. Leif angled his flashlight toward the cruiser. "Harbor unit to dispatch," he said into his radio. "I'm checking a possible animal trapped on sea dock. No backup needed yet." The radio answered with a sleepy acknowledgement. He stepped onto the Laurel Bell's stern platform. Ice shifted under his boot, and he caught the rail before his balance went. The cabin door had swollen in its frame. He had to shoulder it twice before it opened with a frozen groan. Inside, the air smelled stale and metallic. The storm had forced water through a cracked side window, leaving a thin skin of ice across the floor. Leif moved carefully, flashlight cutting through the narrow cabin, over mildewed cushions, a fallen mug, a cabinet door swinging on one hinge. The sound came again from below. He found the engine room hatch near the rear deck. Its latch had iced over, and the metal rim had warped where the boat must have slammed against the dock during the night. Leif crouched and worked at it with his gloved fingers, then used the butt of his flashlight to break the ice around the hinge. The hatch opened only 6 inches. Something shifted beneath it. A low breath came through the gap. Leif froze, not from fear, but from the sudden intimacy of that sound. A living creature was down there, close enough to hear, far enough to lose. "Easy," he said, his voice lower than the wind. "I hear you." The answer was a single scrape against metal. His phone vibrated in his chest pocket. For one strange second, the noise startled him more than the storm had. He pulled it out and saw his sister's name on the screen. Maribel. Her calls had become less frequent in the last year, not because she cared less, but because he had trained her not to expect an answer. She still tried on storm mornings. She always had, even when they were kids and thunder rolled over the old house in Portland. Back then, she used to knock on his door and ask if the sky was allowed to sound that angry. Leif let the call ring until it stopped. Then the thing under the hatch scraped again. This time, it sounded weaker. The guilt he had ignored with his sister became something sharper when it belonged to a creature trapped in the cold. "Hold on," he said. He found a pry bar in a storage locker and worked it under the hatch edge. The metal protested. The boat shifted beneath him. He set his boots wider, put his shoulder into the lift, and forced the hatch up inch by inch until the bent latch gave way. The smell hit first: oil, old bilge water, wet fur. His flashlight beam dropped into the cramped engine space. At first, he saw only hoses, the dark bulk of the engine, and a narrow maintenance gap beside the starboard wall. Then 2 amber-brown eyes caught the light. A German shepherd lay wedged between the engine housing and a low vent shaft. He was full-grown, male, black and tan, with a dark saddle across his back, though his coat was dulled by grease and meltwater. His tan chest and legs trembled from cold. One ear stood upright. The left ear had a small V-shaped notch along the edge. His dark muzzle rested near a patch of frozen condensation beneath the vent, where thawed snow must have dripped down through the night. He did not bark. He did not bare his teeth. He watched Leif with the exhausted steadiness of an animal deciding whether one more human was worth fearing. Leif lowered the flashlight a little so it would not blind him. "All right," he said. "That's fair." The dog tried to rise. His legs shook, and he sank back down, but he kept his body angled toward the vent shaft, as if guarding it. Leif studied the space. No other animal. No visible injury beyond exhaustion and cold. A leather collar sat tight against the dog's neck. Dark brown, cracked from age and salt. A scratched metal tag hung from the ring. The front read, "Tiller." The back had been scraped hard enough to scar the metal. Leif did not like that. He reached down slowly, palm turned sideways. Not over the dog's head. Tiller's nostrils moved. His eyes flicked to Leif's wrist, to the flashlight, to the hatch, to the open cabin above. He was not tame in that moment. He was not wild either. He was something more painful. Trained once, loved once, and recently taught that neither fact guaranteed safety. "You don't have to trust me," Leif said. "You just have to let me get you warm." Tiller blinked. It was not permission exactly, but it was not refusal. Leif took off his parka, folded it over his arms, and lowered himself as far into the engine space as his shoulders allowed. The old metal bit cold through his uniform. His boot slipped once on ice, and his knee struck the deck hard enough to send pain up his thigh. He waited for the anger that usually followed pain. It did not come. There was no room for it. He eased one arm under Tiller's chest and the other behind his hindquarters. The dog made a low sound, not aggressive, only afraid. Leif paused until the sound faded. Then he lifted. Tiller was heavier than he looked, but too light for his frame. Leif felt every tremor pass through the parka as he brought him up through the hatch and into the gray morning. Snow touched the dog's muzzle. Tiller turned his head toward the harbor before his paws even found the deck, toward the VIP slips. Leif noticed, but he did not name the thought yet. He carried Tiller back across Sea Dock while dawn widened behind the storm clouds. Twice the dog tried to lift his head. Twice his strength failed. By the time they reached the boatworks, the kerosene heater had warmed the front room just enough to soften the frost along the lower windows. Leif laid him on a canvas drop cloth near the workbench and wrapped him in 2 old wool blankets. He filled a shallow pan with water, warmed it slightly, and set it close. Tiller sniffed but did not drink. "Suit yourself," Leif said, though the words came out gentler than he intended. The dog's eyes remained on the door. Leif followed that gaze through the grimy glass toward the marina. Most of the harbor was still dim, but the VIP side shone clean and bright. One yacht in particular had deck lights burning despite the hour, a long white vessel beyond the older slips, polished even under snow. Leif looked away before the thought took shape. He radioed dispatch again, reported the animal found alive, and requested the number for Dr. Maris Calloway's clinic in case emergency care was needed once the roads cleared. Then he crouched beside Tiller and loosened the collar by 1 notch. The tag turned in his fingers. Tiller. On the damaged back, beneath the scratches, he thought he could make out part of a letter. Maybe an O, maybe nothing. His thumb moved toward the cracked watch on his wrist. This time he stopped himself. Tiller's breathing had steadied a little. His eyes closed, then opened again as if sleep was too risky to accept. Leif understood that more than he wanted to. "You can rest," he said. The dog did not. So Leif sat on the floor with his back against the workbench and faced the door with him. For almost an hour, the only sounds were the heater ticking, the wind dragging snow off the roof, and Tiller's uneven breathing slowly becoming less fragile. The boatworks felt different with another heartbeat inside it. Not warm exactly, not safe exactly, but less like a place built for a man trying to disappear. Leif was still sitting there when a black SUV rolled up outside and stopped too sharply near the open bay door. Blaine Yardley stepped out into the snow as if winter had personally inconvenienced him. He wore a charcoal overcoat, black leather gloves, and a burgundy scarf tucked neatly at his throat. His silver-gray hair was combed in a precise side part that the wind failed to disturb. Everything about him looked expensive, controlled, and faintly displeased. He glanced once at the peeling boatworks sign, then at Leif on the floor, then at the dog wrapped in blankets. "Well," Blaine said, his voice smooth enough to pass for politeness if no one listened closely. "That explains the radio chatter." Leif stood slowly, found him trapped in the Laurel Bell. "I heard." Blaine's eyes moved over the room. Heater, blankets, muddy boot prints, police parka damp on the floor. "Sergeant, this arrangement was always meant to be temporary. The marina has investors visiting this month. We cannot have the old boatworks looking like a shelter. It belongs to the town. It sits beside my marina. That isn't the same thing." Blaine smiled without warmth. "Perception often matters more than paperwork." Tiller lifted his head. The movement was small, but Blaine saw it. His gaze dropped to the dog's collar. For half a second, the careful expression on his face changed. Not fear, not surprise exactly. Recognition, quickly buried. Then Blaine looked past Leif, through the window, toward the VIP slips where the lights still burned against the pale snow. Leif saw that too. Blaine adjusted one black glove. "Move the dog somewhere else," he said. High-end clients do not pay winter storage fees to look at strays and troubled officers haunting the waterfront. The words landed cleanly. Blaine had chosen them to. Leif felt the old familiar closing inside his chest. The instinct to step back, say little, become smaller until the room no longer had to make space for him. But behind him, Tiller shifted under the blanket and gave one low, tired breath. Not a growl, not a plea, just proof that he was still there. Leif looked at Blaine. "No." The marina manager's smile thinned. "No, no," Leif said again. "He stays warm until the vet sees him. Snow moved softly through the open doorway between them. Somewhere out in the harbor, a dock line creaked under fresh ice. Blaine's eyes returned once more to the scratched tag on Tiller's collar. Then he turned back to his SUV. "This town has been very patient with you, Sergeant," he said over his shoulder. "Don't confuse patience with permission." He drove away without waiting for an answer. Leif stood in the doorway until the taillights vanished behind the white rows of covered yachts. Only then did he close the bay door against the cold. When he turned around, Tiller was watching him. The dog's head was up now, ears uneven, amber eyes clearer than before. He still looked weak, he still looked wary, but he was no longer looking only toward the harbor. For the first time, he was looking at Leif as if the man might be part of the watch. Leif returned to the floor beside him. He did not touch the dog. Not yet. Outside, Frost Harbor brightened under the new snow, clean enough to hide almost anything. Inside the old boatworks, a police sergeant who had spent a year trying not to be needed sat beside a German shepherd with a scratched name tag, and neither of them slept. By the time the roads cleared enough for cautious driving, Frost Harbor had turned painfully bright. Snow reflected off every roof, every windshield, every white-wrapped yacht in the marina, until the whole town seemed built from cold light. Leif drove with one hand steady on the wheel, and the other resting near the passenger seat, not touching Tiller, only close enough that the dog could know the hand was there. Tiller lay on a folded blanket, too large for the space and too tired to object. His head stayed up despite his exhaustion. Every few seconds, his amber-brown eyes shifted from the road to Leif, then back to the harbor beyond the windows. He had accepted water. He had accepted warmth. He had not accepted safety. Leif understood the distinction. Dr. Maris Calloway's clinic sat 2 streets above the waterfront, tucked between a closed bait shop and a bakery that opened before dawn for fishermen. Plow drivers and people who pretended coffee counted as breakfast. The sign above the door had a painted gull on it, though someone had added a knitted scarf around the bird's neck for winter. Maris opened the side entrance before Leif had time to knock. She was smaller than he remembered from town meetings. Quick-moving and calm, with chestnut-brown hair tied low at the nape of her neck and a pencil tucked behind one ear. Her sea-green scrubs were half hidden beneath a cream cardigan, and her boots had salt stains at the toes. She looked at Leif first, then at Tiller, and whatever greeting she had planned disappeared. "Bring him in through here," she said. "No panic, no pity, just purpose." Leif liked that immediately. The exam room was warm without being soft. Stainless steel, clean towels, a rubber mat on the floor, shelves lined with labeled jars and folded gauze. Tiller hesitated at the threshold. His body tightened when he smelled other animals, disinfectant, metal, fear old and new. Maris did not reach for him. Instead, she stepped aside and lowered her voice. "He can choose the table or the floor. Floor is fine, if that is what he needs." Leif glanced at her. She caught the look and gave the smallest shrug. Not everything has to be lifted to be helped. The sentence landed harder than it should have. Tiller chose the floor. Maris knelt a few feet away, not directly in front of him, and let him study her. She offered the back of her hand, still as a dock cleat. Tiller smelled her fingers, her sleeve, the faint traces of animals she had treated that morning. Then he turned his head back toward Leif. "Good," Maris said softly. "He is still making decisions." She worked slowly. She checked his gums, listened to his heart, felt along his ribs and hips, inspected his paws, looked under the collar, where the leather had rubbed a faint groove into the fur. Tiller flinched once when her fingers passed near the left side of his neck. Not enough to be a warning. Enough to be history. "He has not been out on his own for months," Maris said. Leif stood near the wall with his arms folded, because if he unfolded them, he might start doing useless things with his hands. "How do you know?" "Teeth are too clean. Nails were trimmed recently enough to matter. Pads are worn but not cracked the way I would expect from a stray surviving winter pavement. Muscle tone says he was exercised, maybe regularly. He is thin now, but this is recent." Leif looked down at Tiller's scratched tag. "He belonged to someone." "Yes," Maris said, "and someone tried very hard to make that harder to prove." She tilted the tag with one gloved finger. The front still read Tiller clearly. The back was nearly ruined, metal scraped into rough silver scars. Could be old damage, Life said, because good police work required boring possibilities before darker ones. Could be. Maris looked at him. But you do not believe that. He did not answer. Maris gave Tiller a small amount of warm food. He smelled it, waited, then ate with careful restraint, as if every bite needed permission. After a few mouthfuls, he stopped and leaned his shoulder against Leif's boot. Not affection. Not yet. Contact. Leif felt it through the leather. Maris noticed but did not comment. She took a small clipboard from the counter and wrote in neat, compact lines. I am marking him as found under hazardous conditions, possible abandonment or unlawful confinement. Until an owner is confirmed, you need to document everything. Where you found him, who saw him, his condition, the collar, the tag. I know. Knowing and doing are different, Sergeant. The title was not unkind. It was a reminder that his badge made every mistake heavier. Leif nodded once. I will file it. Good. Because if someone claims him later, or if someone does not want you asking questions, the paper trail protects the dog as much as it protects you. Outside the clinic window, a plow pushed snow away from the curb in a long, grinding wave. Tiller lifted his head at the sound. His body tensed, then settled when Leif did not move. Maris lowered her clipboard. He is not aggressive. No. But he is carrying something. Leif looked at the dog. Tiller's eyes were open and fixed on the door, not frantic, not blank. Waiting. Yes, Leif said. He is. Maris sent them back to the boatworks with instructions, food, a temporary medical tag, and one look that said more than advice would have. Go slowly. Do not make the need to save something bigger than the thing being saved. Leif heard it even though she did not say it. For the next 2 days, Tiller turned the boatworks into a place with rules Life had not written. He slept near the wide bay door, but angled himself so he could also see the smaller office entrance. When Life moved, Tiller watched. When the heater ticked, Tiller opened one eye. When the wind pushed loose snow from the roof and it slid down in a heavy whisper, both man and dog looked up at the same time. They did not comfort each other. That would have been too simple. They kept watch near each other. That was different. Leif still rose before dawn. He still walked the inside of the building before stepping outside. He still checked the latch on the office door, the lock on the bay door, the side window with the cracked frame. But on the second night, when his hand touched the bay door lock for the third time, Tiller stood. The dog did not bark. He did not whine. He simply came close and placed himself beside Leif's leg, shoulder aligned with his knee, eyes on the same door. Leif's fingers rested on the lock. Click it again, and the room would remain the same. The habit would stay fed. The old fear would be granted another small victory and call itself caution. Behind him, the heater ticked once. Tiller breathed steadily. Leif removed his hand. The door remained locked. Nothing came through it. For a few seconds, that felt impossible. Then Tiller leaned his weight, lightly, against Leif's leg and looked away first, as if the matter had never been worth a ceremony. Leif almost laughed. It came close enough to hurt. Don't get proud, he said. Tiller returned to his blanket and lowered his head. The next morning, dispatch called Life about a line sagging near the VIP slips. Ice had pulled it low enough to worry one of the marina's winter clients, and the power company could not send a crew until later in the day. It was not a major call, but Frost Harbor had learned not to ignore small winter problems. Small things became expensive quickly near water. Leif clipped Tiller's leash to the old leather collar. He did not love the idea of bringing him through the marina, but leaving him alone in the boatworks felt worse. The dog had rested, eaten, and regained enough strength to object quietly whenever Life stepped out of sight. They moved along the cleared path between the slips. Snowbanks rose on either side, glittering in sunlight, sharp enough to make the eyes ache. The older boats sat silent and hunched under tarps. Past them, the marina changed character. The boards were newer, the railings shone, the security cameras were tucked under black domes. Even the snow seemed cleaner in the VIP section, pushed neatly into decorative piles by men paid to make winter look managed. Tiller slowed before Leif did. His ears lifted, then flattened. Leif stopped. Ahead of them, the silver meridian rested in its slip like a white knife laid against the dark water. Long hull, polished railings, frosted windows, deck lights still glowing despite the morning sun. She was too awake for a winter-stored vessel. Tiller's body lowered, not in obedience, in dread. His paws spread slightly on the icy boards. His shoulders tightened. A tremor ran through him from neck to tail, so visible that Leif felt his own breathing change in response. The dog pulled not away from the yacht, but toward its starboard side, toward a narrow vent below the deck line. Leif let him lead 3 steps. Tiller pressed his nose toward the vent and inhaled sharply, then recoiled as if the air itself had struck him. A low sound came from his throat, small and strained. He looked back at Leif once, then at the vent again. Leif crouched beside him, careful not to block his path. The smell reached him faintly. Diesel, but wrong somehow, sweetened by a fuel additive, tarred line, cold metal. Beneath that, something sterile and sharp, like disinfectant used where no passengers were meant to go. Not the smell of a luxury yacht waiting out winter. Leif took out his phone and photographed the vent from a public walkway angle, careful not to step onto the vessel. A voice behind him said, "That is not your boat." Blaine Yardley stood at the head of the slip in his charcoal overcoat, burgundy scarf perfectly placed despite the cold. His black gloves were folded around a silver pen, which he tapped once against his palm. Leif stood. Tiller moved half a step behind him, not hiding, only placing Leif between himself and the yacht. "I had a call about a sagging line," Leif said. "The line is being handled." "By who?" "By the marina. That line crosses a public access edge. If it drops lower, someone catches it across the chest in the dark." Blaine's smile held, always dramatic, usually accurate. For the first time, Blaine's eyes cooled openly. The Silver Meridian is owned by a man whose investment may be the reason Frost Harbor has a working marina 5 years from now. Perhaps you should consider that before treating his property like a crime scene. "I am standing on the dock, with a dog you were told to remove." Tiller trembled once behind Leif's leg. Blaine's gaze dropped to him. Poor creature, fear can make animals unreliable. Fear can also make them honest. The words were out before Leif softened them. Blaine looked at him for a long moment. "You have had a difficult year, Sergeant. People understand that. They have been generous with that understanding." Leif did not touch his watch. Blaine continued, voice smooth enough for any passerby to mistake as concern. "But generosity becomes concern when a troubled officer begins wandering private docks, photographing vessels, and inventing meaning from a stray's behavior." A gull cried from a roofline. Somewhere behind the marina office, a snowblower started and filled the morning with rough mechanical noise. Leif clipped the leash a little shorter, not because Tiller needed control, but because he needed to feel the dog was still there. "I will write up the sagging line," Leif said, "and the animal condition report. Write whatever makes you feel useful." Blaine stepped closer, just enough to lower his voice. "Do not confuse this town's patience with permission." He had said it before. This time it sounded less like irritation and more like policy. Leif looked past him to the Silver Meridian's lit windows. One deck light flickered once in the clear morning. Tiller saw it too. The dog made that low, strained sound again, then pressed his body against Leif's leg so hard the leash slackened. Leif did not move toward the yacht. He did not give Blaine the mistake the man seemed to be waiting for. He only looked down at Tiller, then at the vent, then at Blaine's silver pen tapping against one black glove. "All right," Leif said. Blaine's mouth curved slightly, believing he had won. Leif turned away from the Silver Meridian and walked back toward the older docks, with Tiller beside him. He did not look back until they reached the bend near the bait shop. Blaine was still standing by the VIP slip, and he was not watching Leif. He was watching Tiller. By the third morning after Tiller came out of the frozen yacht, Frost Harbor had begun pretending the storm was over. That was what small towns did after bad weather. They shoveled the sidewalks, reopened the bakery, salted the church steps, and spoke of wind damage in practical voices, as if naming broken things made them less personal. Snow still clung to the roofs in bright, heavy layers. Ice still glazed the dock cleats. The harbor still carried a dark winter swell under its pretty white edges. Leif knew better than to trust a town just because it looked calm. He also knew better than to trust himself too quickly. So before he followed the thought that had been pressing at him since the Silver Meridian, he did the dull work first. He filed the found animal report. He added photographs of Tiller's collar, the scratched tag, the place where the dog had been found, and the condition of the Laurel Bell's hatch. He wrote in careful, plain language. No theories, no dramatic phrasing. No mention of the way Blaine Yardley had looked at the tag before looking toward the VIP slips. Facts first, theories later. Tiller lay beside the desk in the boatworks office while Life typed. The German Shepherd had eaten more that morning, though he still paused between mouthfuls, as if expecting the bowl to be taken away. His coat had begun to show its true colors now that the worst of the engine grime had been cleaned from it. Black saddle across the back, tan chest and legs, a faint gray cast along the shoulders, like winter smoke caught in fur. The small V-shaped notch in his left ear made him look as if the world had signed him and failed to finish the job. Every time Life typed the word unknown beside owner information, Tiller lifted his head. "That is not an accusation," Life said. Tiller blinked once. Life saved the report. Then he went looking for someone who remembered. The Gull and Lantern Diner sat across from the working docks, where the fishermen came before sunrise, and the marina clients came only when they wanted to feel authentic, without being cold for too long. The place had steamed windows, red vinyl stools split at the seams, and a bell above the door that sounded embarrassed to still be working. Ruth Calderine looked up from behind the counter as Leaf entered with Tiller at his side. Ruth was in her early 60s, broad-shouldered and small-eyed in a way that made people confess things before they had decided to. Her silver hair was twisted into a knot and held with a pencil. She wore a black apron over a thick green sweater, and her hands moved with the efficient authority of someone who could refill coffee, correct a lie, and judge a pie crust in the same breath. The diner quieted when Tiller stepped inside. Not fully. Frost Harbor people were too proud to stare openly, but spoons slowed. A chair leg stopped scraping. A man near the window looked down into his coffee as if it had suddenly become complicated. Ruth did not look at Leaf first. She looked at the dog. "Oh, Lord," she said softly. "That is Orrin's boy." Tiller's ears came forward. The name moved through him before Life could ask a question. Not excitement, not simple recognition. The dog's body went still in a way that made the air around him seem careful. Life kept the leash loose. Orrin Bell Trowick. Ruth's mouth tightened. Who else in this town would name a shepherd Tiller and expect folks not to laugh? Did people laugh? Not twice. A few of the fishermen at the counter gave small, reluctant smiles. One of them turned away quickly. Leif stepped closer to the counter. "When did you last see him?" Ruth set down the coffee pot. 3 weeks ago. Maybe a little more. He came in for chowder he said he did not like and ate 2 bowls of it. Tiller sat right there. She pointed to the floor near the last stool. Orrin fed him oyster crackers one at a time like he was paying a deckhand. Tiller moved to the spot she pointed at and lowered his nose to the worn tile. The diner became quieter than before. Ruth folded her arms, but the gesture did not make her look hard. It made her look as if she were holding something in place. Blaine's office put out that Orrin left over unpaid dock fees. Said he was embarrassed. Said he took off before the marina had to make it official. "You believe that?" "I believe coffee burns when it is hot and ice melts when it warms," Ruth said. "I do not believe Orrin Trowick left his heart in a dog collar and walked away." Leif let that sit. He had known towns to erase people in stages, first by calling them difficult, then by calling them unreliable. Finally, by speaking of them in the past tense while their chair was still warm. It was a quieter kind of cruelty than the kind people recognized. Paperwork helped. So did gossip. So did the need to keep business moving. "What was Orrin worried about?" Leif asked. Ruth glanced toward the windows, toward the marina beyond the frosted glass. He said rich boats had started coming in at strange hours. Not during season, not for repairs. Just in, lights low, out again before breakfast. Did he report it? He tried. Ruth looked back at him. You know how men like Orrin report things. Half warning, half insult. Makes people want to prove him wrong before they hear him. Leif did know. He also knew how departments handled inconvenient warnings when the person giving them had no polish and no influence. Tiller returned to Leif's side, but he did not lean against him. He faced the door, as if waiting for an old man who was late. Leif thanked Ruth and turned to leave. She stopped him with one sentence. "Check his boat before you decide what kind of missing he is." The words followed him back into the cold. Orrin's boat was tied in the cheaper slips beyond the fuel dock, far from the polished lines and heated walkways of the VIP marina. The vessel was named Mabel June in faded blue letters, small, weathered, honest, a working boat that had earned its scratches instead of acquiring them as style. Leif radioed dispatch before stepping aboard. Harbor unit conducting welfare check on Orrin Bell Trawick's vessel. Possible missing person follow-up. Time is 0940. The acknowledgement crackled back. He did not want anyone to say later that he had wandered in alone because he needed a mystery. Tiller hesitated at the gangway. For the first time since the diner, he gave a quiet sound that was not fear. It was thinner than that. Older. Leif crouched beside him. "You know this place?" Tiller looked at the cabin door. Leif took a spare evidence glove from his pocket and opened the latch with 2 fingers. It was not properly locked, just hooked enough to look closed from a distance. Inside, the cabin held the stale cold of a place abandoned too abruptly. An old wool sweater lay across the back of a chair. A pair of reading glasses sat open beside a marine weather almanac. On the tiny stove, a kettle weighted with water, still inside, frozen solid. A framed photograph of a woman with windblown hair rested near the bunk, its glass cracked in one corner, but clean around the edges where someone had wiped dust away with care. Beside the bunk sat a metal dog bowl, dry. Tiller crossed the cabin slowly. He smelled the bowl, then the blanket near the bunk, then the space beneath the small table. His tail did not wag. His body did not collapse into grief in any human way. He simply stood there, breathing in what remained of a life that had not packed itself to leave. Leif looked around the cabin and felt his first real anger of the morning. Not hot anger, not useful yet. The kind that came when a lie insulted the person it tried to bury. A man leaving town did not abandon heart medication on the shelf. He did not leave a half-repaired net in the sink. He did not leave his late wife's photograph facing the bunk. He did not leave a dog bowl waiting beside the bed. Leif photographed each item before touching anything. In the narrow drawer beneath the chart table, he found the envelope. It had been opened and resealed badly. On the front, in blocky handwriting, Orrin had written Frost Harbor Police Department. Under that, no officer name, no case number, no neat explanation. Someone at the desk had stamped it insufficient information and returned it. Leif felt the old shame rise before he could stop it. Not personal, maybe. Not his mistake, maybe. But it belonged to his department, and he was wearing the badge. Inside were copies of fuel receipts, handwritten tied notes, and 3 grainy photographs. The first showed a truck back near the service gate after midnight. The second showed men loading rectangular containers onto the Silver Meridian under low-deck lights. The third was blurred, but Leif could make out a symbol on the side of one container, a blue compass mark. A note was folded behind the photos. Not marina cargo, something alive in the boxes. The handwriting had pressed hard enough to dent the paper. Tiller's nose touched the edge of the note. Then he stepped back. Leif did not move for a moment. The little cabin seemed to tilt around him. Outside, a gull landed on the rail and shook snow from its wings. Leif went on with offensive ease. His phone vibrated. Maribel again. Leif looked at the screen until her name disappeared. This time, he did not put the phone away quickly. He stood in a missing man's cabin, holding a warning that had come to the police and been returned unread, while a loyal dog stood beside an empty bowl. For one clean, painful second, Leif understood that silence was not neutral. Silence chose sides, even when it claimed to be tired. He saved the missed call notification instead of clearing it. Then he called Captain Vera Lindholm. Vera did not ask him to explain twice. She met him at the station 30 minutes later in the small conference room, with the bad heat and the map of Frost Harbor pinned crooked on the wall. She was 52, composed in a navy uniform jacket that looked warm because she refused to admit otherwise. Her ash-blonde hair was cut in a blunt bob tucked behind one ear. She had eyes that did not soften for weak logic, which was one of the reasons Leif still trusted her when she was hard on him. She spread the copies across the table without touching the originals. "Tell me what you know," she said. Orrin Bell Trawick owned Tiller. Multiple locals confirm it. Orrin disappeared roughly 3 weeks ago. Marina records claim unpaid fees and voluntary departure. His boat suggests otherwise. Medication, personal effects, dog supplies, all left behind. Envelope to the department was returned for insufficient information. Vera's jaw moved once. She looked at the stamped envelope longer than any of the photos. "That should have been logged," she said. "Yes. You find this while on duty?" "Yes, welfare check, called in before entry." "Good." It was not praise. It was a relief that he had not handed Blaine Yardley an easy weapon. Vera studied the photo of the containers. "These are not enough for a warrant, I know. They are enough for questions. I know that too." Her eyes lifted. "Do you? Because the last time you believed a narrow window was closing, you moved before backup had eyes on the water. The room went still. Leif felt the words enter the place he kept sealed. The fog, the radio traffic, his own voice calling a man's name into weather that gave nothing back. Vera did not apologize. That was not cruelty. It was leadership. "You are not wrong to care," she said, "but if Blaine Yardley wants you painted as unstable, do not hand him the brush." Leif looked down at Orrin's note. Something alive in the boxes. "What do you want me to do?" "Go slow," Vera said. "Find another witness. Build a timeline. Document chain of custody on everything from that boat. And until I say otherwise, you do not step onto the Silver Meridian." Leif nodded. It cost him more than it should have. By late afternoon, he found Miles Gentry behind the marina maintenance shed, fighting with a frozen pump and losing politely. Miles was 34, tall and narrow, wearing a rust-orange maintenance jacket over a gray hoodie. His sandy hair stuck out from beneath a green knit cap, and his face had the pale, worn look of a man who slept badly for reasons that had nothing to do with weather. A heavy ring of marina keys hung from his belt and chimed whenever his hands shook. When he saw Leif, the keys went quiet because Miles grabbed them. "That pump's always been garbage," Leif said. Miles stared at him. "You hear about the pump?" "No." "Figured." Tiller stood beside Leif, alert but calm. Miles looked at the dog and swallowed. "You recognize him," Leif said. Miles wiped his hands on a rag already too dirty to help. "Everybody does. That is not an answer." Miles looked toward the marina office. Blaine's black SUV sat near the entrance, polished clean despite the snow. "I saw Orrin argue with Mr. Yardley," Miles said finally, "night before he disappeared. Orrin had been on the Silver Meridian. Said he fixed a backup pump. Came off mad. What was the argument about?" "I did not hear all of it." "Miles." The keys trembled once. "He said there were boxes where boxes should not be," said he heard scratching. Mr. Yardley told him old men hear things in winter. Tiller's ears rose. Leif kept his voice even. "What happened the night Orrin disappeared?" Miles looked at the frozen ground. A skiff left after midnight from the service dock. No lights at first, then one small red light once it cleared the breakwater. "Who was on it?" "I do not know." "Who took it out?" Miles closed his eyes briefly. "I do not know because I made sure not to look." That was the first honest thing he had said. Leif did not push immediately. He waited. Snow slid from the shed roof in a soft sheet behind them. "My father needs oxygen at night," Miles said, as if the sentence had been dragged out of him by force. "Insurance covers some of it. Not all. Mr. Yardley knows what I make. He knows what I cannot lose." Leif looked at him and saw something he had almost forgotten how to recognize. Not guilt alone, but captivity wearing work boots. "I am not asking you to be a hero," Leif said. Miles gave a short, humorless breath. "That is good. I am not built for it. I am asking you to remember accurately." Miles looked at Tiller. The dog stood still, amber eyes steady, the notch in his ear sharp against the winter light. Miles's keys chimed again. "There is an old service log," he said, "not the one Blaine shows clients. Paper 1, locked in the maintenance cabinet. It has skiff fuel, late power draws, dock gate overrides, if nobody threw it out. Can you get it?" Miles shook his head too quickly. "Not today." Leif did not mistake fear for refusal. "Not yet. Then remember where it is," he said. Miles looked back at the marina office. "Sergeant?" "Yeah. If Orrin is alive, he did not leave by choice." Leif felt Tiller shift closer at the sound of Orrin's name. The harbor behind them was turning blue with evening. Across the marina, the Silver Meridian's deck lights came on before dark, clean and expensive and patient. Leif did not move toward it. He had a name, a boat that had not been emptied by choice, a warning his department had failed to hear, and a witness too afraid to stand upright under what he knew. It was not enough, but it was no longer nothing. The hardest evidence in Frost Harbor was never the kind people hid. It was the kind people explained away. By noon the next day, Captain Vera Lindholm had spread everything across the conference room table in clean lines. Orrin Trowick's returned envelope, the fuel receipts, Leif's photographs from the old man's boat, the image of the containers near the Silver Meridian, and a printed copy of Tiller's found animal report. No one said the dog had solved anything. Vera would not allow that kind of thinking in her room. "Start with what does not require belief," she said. Dr. Maris Calloway sat at the far end of the table, with her sea-green field notebook open beside a paper cup of coffee she had forgotten to drink. Outside the station windows, plows pushed gray snow toward the curb. Inside, the overhead lights gave everything a tired color. Maris looked more like a witness than a veterinarian now, her cardigan replaced by a teal puffer jacket, still damp at the shoulders. Leif stood near the map of Frost Harbor. Tiller lay beside his left boot, alert but quiet, his black and tan body angled toward the door. The dog had not relaxed inside the station. He had only decided, for the moment, not to leave. Vera tapped the photograph of the containers. "The image is weak." "Yes," Leif said. "The returned envelope is embarrassing. Yes, it does not prove criminal conduct." "No, good. Then we are all still adults." Maris turned one page in her notebook. "What it does suggest is a pattern worth documenting." Vera looked at her. Maris did not rush to fill the silence. That was one of the things Leif had begun to appreciate about her. She did not mistake calm for delay. "If someone were moving sensitive live cargo through a winter marina," she said, choosing each word carefully, "they would need temperature control, not warmth in the general sense. Stable warmth. Too cold, the animals fail. Too hot, same problem. That means insulated containers, heating elements, battery packs, sometimes sanitizer to manage disease risk." Vera's eyes narrowed slightly. "You can support that in writing?" "I can support what the equipment would require. I cannot say what was in the containers without seeing them." "Fair." Leif added, "The power draw at the auxiliary storage building spiked on 4 nights this month. Same nights, the Silver Meridian was logged as receiving maintenance." Vera looked up. "Who gave you the utility record?" "The town clerk. Public municipal account. The building is still tied to an old town meter, even though the marina uses it for overflow storage." Vera's mouth tightened with reluctant approval. "Good. Clean source." Leif placed another sheet on the table. "Fuel logs do not match the harbor entry notes. Silver Meridian reported short engine tests. Receipts show enough diesel for longer movement, or sloppy bookkeeping," Vera said. "Or that. Keep both possibilities alive until one dies." Tiller lifted his head at the word dies, or maybe only at the change in Vera's tone. Leif lowered his hand, not touching the dog, only letting it rest where Tiller could see it. Maris noticed the motion. Vera noticed Maris noticing. No one commented. That was mercy in a police station. By 3 in the afternoon they had enough to justify more questions, but not enough to open the Silver Meridian. Vera requested copies of dock access records. Leif filed a supplemental report. Maris wrote a professional summary of Tiller's physical condition and the environmental concerns related to heated transport containers. Every sentence became smaller than the truth. Every word had to survive, being hated by someone with money. Leif hated that part. He had always preferred weather. Weather did not pretend to be reasonable while trying to drown you. At 4:30, Blaine Yardley arrived at the station with a leather folder and a face arranged for disappointment. He did not demand. Demanding would have made him look nervous. Instead, he requested a meeting in a voice polished smooth by years of speaking to donors and town officials. Vera received him in her office. The door remained half open, not enough for privacy, not enough for theater. Leif stood at his desk in the squad room and heard only fragments: reputation, harassment, investors, troubled history. Then Blaine's voice, softer but clearer. "I respect Sergeant Winslow's service to this town, but respect does not mean the marina must become the stage for his recovery." Leif felt the room tilt by a degree. Not because the words were loud. They were worse than loud. They were careful. Blaine had not called him unstable. He had suggested concern. Concern sounded kinder than accusation and traveled farther. Tiller stood from beside Leif's desk. The dog crossed the squad room slowly and stopped in front of Vera's office door. Not inside, not interfering, just present. Blaine's sentence stopped. For a moment, the only sound was the old station heater rattling under the window. Then Vera said, "Mr. Yardley, the dog is part of an open found animal report. You may direct further concerns to my office in writing." Blaine stepped out 2 minutes later. He looked down at Tiller and gave a faint smile. "Still here." Tiller did not move. Leif did not either. Blaine's eyes rose to Leif. "You keep collecting strays, Sergeant," Leif answered quietly. "Some things are only called strays because someone removed the place they belonged." The smile vanished quickly enough that anyone else might have missed it. Blaine left the station without another word. Vera appeared at her office door. "Do not enjoy that line too much." "I did not." "You did." Leif looked away. Vera's expression softened only at the edges. "That man is building a record around you. Be aware of that." "I am." "No," she said. "You are angry. Awareness is slower." He wanted to argue. He did not. That was progress, though it felt like losing. The call came just after sunset. A small maritime artifact had gone missing from the heritage display in the marina office. A brass compass housing from the late 19th century, loaned by a local historical trust for the winter investor tour. Blaine reported it stolen. He also reported that Sergeant Leif Winslow had been seen near the marina office corridor earlier that day. Then the county sheriff's office received an anonymous tip. By the time Leif pulled into the boatworks, 2 county vehicles were already waiting. The snow in front of the bay door was marked by tire tracks that did not belong to him. Deputy Cora Yates stood near the entrance, short, solid, and unreadable under a dark winter cap. Leif knew her by reputation more than friendship. She was from the county office, not Frost Harbor PD, which meant she had no reason to protect him and no interest in Blaine's marina politics. Beside her, a younger deputy kept his hands close to his belt and his eyes moving too fast. Cora held up a paper. "Sergeant Winslow, we have consent from the town administrator to inspect the premises regarding a stolen property report." Leif looked past her into the boatworks. The door was open. His door. For a second, the old part of his body reacted before the thinking part could catch up. Open door. Unknown entry. 2 officers. His space changed without him there. His breathing shortened. Tiller felt it. The German shepherd moved forward until his shoulder brushed Leif's knee. Leif placed 2 fingers against the leash. "You have the right to inspect town property," he said. "I want Captain Lindholm notified." "She is on her way," Cora said. That helped. Not enough. They entered together. The boatworks looked almost the same, which made the differences worse. The heater was off. One drawer near the workbench stood open. A tarp had been shifted from the back shelf. Tiller's blanket had been moved 6 inches to the left, as if someone had nudged it with a boot and not cared where it landed. Leif noticed that detail before anything else. He hated himself a little for it. The younger deputy found the box behind the shelf near the old varnish cabinet. "Mom," he said. Cora crouched but did not touch it. Leif remained near the bay door, hands visible, jaw tight. Tiller stood in front of him now, not lunging, not growling, simply placing his body between Leif and the room. The box was small, wrapped in brown paper, tucked where Leif kept spare dock cleats and worn rope. Cora put on gloves and opened it. Inside lay a brass compass housing, greened at the edges with age, packed in cloth. The younger deputy looked at Leif too quickly. That look was the trap closing. Leif said nothing. His silence had saved him in storms, in arguments, in rooms where people wanted a reaction they could use. But this silence felt different. It could be mistaken for guilt, or shock, or the kind of emptiness Blaine wanted written into the record. Tiller's legs trembled. Not from fear of the deputies, from Leif. The dog had read the change in him and answered with his own body. Leif looked down at Tiller and saw the pain of recognition. The dog was doing what Leif had done for a year, standing guard at the wrong door because love and fear had become tangled together. That struck deeper than the stolen object. He took one slow breath, then another. "Tiller," he said gently, "back." The dog did not obey at first. Leif softened his voice. "Back." Tiller stepped aside. Not far, but enough. Leif looked at Cora Yates. "I did not place that there. I want the packaging preserved. I want photographs before removal. I want the entry route documented. And I want Captain Lindholm present before any statement beyond that." Cora studied him. Whatever she had expected from a supposedly troubled officer, this was not it. "Fair," she said. The younger deputy seemed disappointed. Vera arrived 7 minutes later, coat unbuttoned, face cold with controlled anger. She did not look at Leif first. She looked at the open drawer, the shifted blanket, the box, the paper, the officers, the snow tracked across the floor. Then she looked at Leif. "Did you touch it?" "No." "Did you consent to entry?" "No." "The town administrator did," Cora said. Vera's eyes moved to her. "I will want the exact language of that consent." "You will have it." No one raised a voice. That made the room sharper. Maris arrived after Vera, breathless from walking too fast over icy ground, medical bag still over one shoulder. She stopped at the sight of the artifact box. "That cloth," she said. Everyone looked at her. She did not step closer. "May I?" Cora nodded once, after a brief glance at Vera. Maris leaned near the open package without touching it. Her expression changed in small increments. Confusion first, then recognition. "That is the same antiseptic smell," she said. Leif kept still. Maris looked at Vera. "From the vent near the silver meridian, and from Tiller's neck fur when I first examined him. Faint, but yes." The younger deputy frowned. "You can smell that from there?" "I work with animals who arrive covered in 10 kinds of panic and 3 kinds of bad decisions," Maris said. "Yes, I can smell disinfectant." Cora almost smiled. Vera did not. She crouched beside the box, careful with her coat. "There is fresh salt on the wrapping." "It came from a marina," the younger deputy said. Vera looked at him. "This part of the boatworks is dry. The shelf is dry. The paper is damp at the bottom and clean on the top. That means it was placed recently." Cora nodded slowly. "Could be." Leif saw the first crack in the trap. Not enough to free him, enough to prove the walls were not solid. Vera pointed to the cloth inside the box. "Bag it separately, full chain of custody, no shortcuts." Cora met her eyes. "Agreed." The process took almost an hour. Photographs, evidence bags, notes. Questions Leif answered only within the boundaries Vera allowed. Outside, the evening turned the snow blue again. Inside, the boatworks felt less like shelter and more like a room that had been taught to betray him. When it was done, Cora removed her gloves and faced Leif. "You understand how this looks?" "Yes. You may be contacted for formal interview." "I understand." The younger deputy glanced at Tiller. "Dog should probably be removed from the premises." Tiller's ears lifted. Leif felt the leash tighten. Vera answered before he could. "The dog remains under veterinary observation and found animal documentation. Any change goes through my office." The deputy shut his mouth. After the county vehicles left, Vera stood with Leif in the middle of the boatworks. Maris waited near Tiller, one hand resting near the dog's shoulder but not on it. The place was quiet except for the wind and the distant metallic tapping of a loose halyard somewhere down the marina. Vera took off her gloves slowly. "I cannot make this disappear tonight. I know. I also cannot ignore it. I know that too. You are temporarily off harbor patrol." Leif absorbed the sentence without moving. There it was. Blaine did not need to defeat the truth. Not yet. He only needed to separate life from it. Vera continued. "You will not conduct independent field activity. You will not approach the Silver Meridian. You will not interview marina staff without me assigning it." Leif's hand moved toward the cracked watch. This time he let his thumb touch the rim. The old habit did not calm him. It only reminded him of the cost of moving too fast. "What am I allowed to do?" he asked. "You are allowed to remain the reporting officer on Tiller's animal case. You are allowed to provide context under supervision. You are allowed to let other people carry part of this." That last sentence did not sound like an order. It sounded worse. It sounded like trust. Leif looked toward Tiller. The German shepherd had returned to his blanket, but he was not asleep. His amber eyes watched the room, watched Leif, watched Vera and Maris as if trying to understand the new shape of the pack. Leif had lost the clean line of authority he was used to standing behind. His badge had not vanished, but its weight had changed. He was no longer the man driving the case forward by force of will. For the first time since Tiller came out of the ice, Leif had to stand still and allow someone else to guard the door. He hated it. He needed it. Outside, the marina lights came on one by one across the snow, and the silver meridian glowed in the distance like a polished thing with nothing to fear. Leif learned that being removed from harbor patrol did not make the harbor leave him alone. It stayed in the windows of the boatworks. It stayed in the salt on his boots. It stayed in the cold light that slid across the floorboards every morning and turned every tool, rope coil, and paint can into a shape he could not stop reading. Even off patrol, he knew which dock line had loosened by the way the wind sounded against the bay door. He knew when the tide had turned by the deep change in the pilings below the marina. He knew when the Silver Meridian's deck lights came on without looking. That was the punishment Blaine Yardley had wanted for him. Not a cell, not a hearing, not even public shame, at least not yet, just distance. Captain Vera Lindholm made the distance official and then refused to let it become useless. She arrived at the boatworks just after 7, with a folder under one arm and frost on the shoulders of her navy parka. Doctor. Maris Calloway came behind her, carrying a sealed evidence kit, and a cup of coffee she handed to Leif without asking whether he wanted it. Tiller rose from his blanket when they entered. The German shepherd had filled out only slightly in the last few days, but there was more steadiness in his legs now. His black and tan coat still carried a dull winter roughness, and the V-shaped notch in his left ear made his alertness look sharpened by hand. Vera looked at the dog first, then at Leif. "We are not going to the Silver Meridian." Leif accepted the coffee. "That sounds like a sentence meant to prevent a mistake." "It is." Maris set her kit on the workbench. "We are going to the auxiliary storage building." Leif looked up. Vera opened the folder and removed a signed order. Limited inspection. Utility anomaly. Missing dock access records. Statement from Miles Gentry, and possible evidence tied to the artifact planted here. It is narrow. It is not glamorous. It is what we have. Leif studied the paper, careful not to touch it with hands that suddenly wanted to do too much. "What about Coast Guard?" "On the way." As if summoned by the words, a white Coast Guard pickup rolled past the boatworks window and stopped near the marina service gate. Chief Petty Officer Keir Donovan stepped out into the snow with the unhurried confidence of someone who trusted checklists more than luck. He was compact and solid, with close-cropped black hair, mostly hidden under a dark watch cap, brown eyes that measured rather than judged, and a small scar along his chin. His dark blue Coast Guard jacket was zipped to the throat, and an orange rescue knife hung from a cord at his belt. He shook Vera's hand, nodded to Maris, and gave Leif one glance that took in the uniform under the parka, the tired eyes, the dog, and the invisible line of a man told to stand back. "Sergeant," Keir said. "Chief." "No offense," Keir said, "but I am not holding a privately owned vessel because a dog disliked a vent. None taken. Good, because I may hold one for bad departure paperwork, fuel inconsistencies, crew mismatch, safety concerns after a nor'easter, and possible undeclared cargo." Leif almost smiled. "That sounds better." "It sounds legal," Keir said. "Better comes later." Vera's mouth twitched, but she hid it by turning toward the marina. They did not bring a crowd. Vera, Keir, Maris, Leif, Tiller, and 2 uniformed officers from Frost Harbor kept the approach small. Miles Gentry waited near the service gate, his rust-orange maintenance jacket zipped crookedly, his sandy hair crushed under a green knit cap. The heavy key ring at his belt jingled when he shifted his weight. He looked as if he had slept in a chair. Blaine Yardley was nowhere visible, which made the marina feel more watched rather than less. The auxiliary storage building stood behind the polished face of the VIP slips, tucked near the older maintenance lane where snowplows left dirty ridges and wealthy clients never walked. From outside, it looked ordinary. Corrugated siding, frost along the roll-up door, a keypad lock, and a small exhaust vent half covered in ice. Miles entered the code with a trembling thumb. "Changed last week," he said. Vera looked at him. "By who?" Miles swallowed. "Mr. Yardley." The door rose with a metallic rattle. The building was too clean. That was Leif's first thought. Not clean like well-maintained. Clean like panic had been given a mop. Shelves sat mostly empty. Plastic bins were stacked in perfect rows. The floor had been swept, then rinsed, leaving faint frozen streaks near the drain. There should have been dust in corners, salt from boots, spilled screws, scraps of shrink wrap, the ordinary disorder of winter storage. Instead, the place looked as if someone had tried to erase its memory. Keir stood just inside the entrance. "Nobody wander. Work the path." Vera nodded. "Photographs first." Leif stayed one step behind the line he had been given. He hated the boundary and respected it at the same time. That made it worse. Tiller did not strain forward. He stood close to Leif's leg, nose moving in the cold air. His ears came up, then angled sideways. He gave no dramatic warning, no sudden pull. Only a tightening along his back that Leif had learned to recognize. Maris saw it too. "There," she said, pointing to the far side of the room. Near the north wall, the concrete floor held a rectangular patch where the frost had melted differently. The surface was dry now, but it had a warmer stain to it, a ghost of heat where heat should not have been. Beside it, Leif noticed faint wheel marks, narrow and close together, as if a cart had carried something heavy in repeated trips. Keir crouched without touching the marks. "Storage crates?" "Or insulated transport containers," Maris said. From outside came the muffled sound of a marina gate opening, then closing again. Everyone paused. No one came in. That was the moment Leif understood the room had become a test of restraint. Every part of him wanted to move faster, open bins, pull shelves, chase the invisible line before it vanished. But the case was no longer waiting for his hands. It needed clean photographs, numbered markers, careful notes, and people whose names were not already being dragged through Blaine's version of the truth. Tiller pressed his shoulder lightly against Leif's knee, not to hold him back, to remind him he was still part of the room. Leif let Vera step forward. It cost him something. It gave the case more. They found the first useful piece under the edge of a steel shelf, a torn strip of white synthetic tie marked with a partial blue compass logo. The second was smaller, almost nothing, a translucent flake of hard plastic caught near the drain. Maris bagged it carefully. Keir found a battery label in the trash, the kind used for portable heating elements, though the battery itself was gone. "No animals," one of Vera's officers said from the back corner. Maris looked around the empty room. That may be the point. A vehicle approached outside. This time, the engine stopped near the storage building. A woman in an olive-gray field jacket stepped in a minute later, removing one glove as she crossed the threshold. She was in her mid-40s with hazel eyes, dark hair gathered into a low knot, and a small metal sample case in her hand. Her movements were quiet, but the room made space for her anyway. "Special Agent Rosalie Bentham," Vera said. "Wildlife Trafficking Unit." Rosalie gave a brief nod to the room, then looked at the evidence markers. "Show me what was worth dragging me through coastal snow." Maris handed her the bag tie and plastic flake. Rosalie did not perform surprise. She took out a small light, examined the edge of the plastic, then looked at the warm patch on the floor. "Insulated transport," she said. "Not proof of species, not proof of live cargo by itself, but combined with power draw, sanitizer odor, night movement, and hidden loading, yes. This is consistent with heated wildlife transport." Keir folded his arms. "Could be reptiles? Could be. Could be young sea turtles if someone is moving them north temporarily before a transfer. Nobody with sense would keep them in this climate without controlled heat." "Smugglers do not always have sense," Maris said. Rosalie's expression did not change. "They usually have enough to be dangerous." Leif watched Tiller. The dog's eyes were fixed on the strip with the blue compass mark. His nostrils worked slowly, then stopped. He lowered his head for a moment, not in fear exactly, but in the weary way a body remembers before the mind can translate. Leif wanted to kneel beside him. He did not. There were too many people watching, and not all comfort belonged in public. By late afternoon, the storage building had given them fragments, not victory. The kind of evidence that made a pattern stronger without making a courtroom easy. Vera knew it. Keir knew it. Rosalie knew it best. "Whoever cleaned this knew enough to remove the obvious," Rosalie said, sealing her sample case. "But not enough to remove use," Leif said. She looked at him. He held up a hand slightly. "Sorry. Habit." "No," she said. "You are right. Spaces tell on themselves. Heat, weight, route, timing. People clean objects. They forget behavior." That sentence stayed with him. The same could be said of towns, of departments, of men who shaved, wore clean uniforms, answered calls, and thought no one could see the shape of what they avoided. Vera's phone rang before Leif could follow that thought too far. She answered, listened, then turned toward the door. The Historical Trust sent someone about the brass compass housing. Leif felt the familiar tightening, the planted artifact, the thing designed to make him look small and dishonest. They met the specialist back at the station, where the compass housing sat sealed, under evidence protocols, in a room that smelled of paper and old radiator heat. Helena Marchant arrived with snow on the hem of her long dark coat and a canvas document tube under one arm. She was a state maritime preservation consultant in her late 50s, narrow-faced, silver-haired, and impatient in the focused way of a person who had spent a career asking people not to treat history like decoration. She put on gloves before she sat down. "May I see the item?" Cora Yates from the county office stood witness while Vera authorized the viewing. Leif remained outside the evidence room door until Vera glanced at him and gave one short nod. Inside, Helena examined the brass housing through the plastic first, then under controlled handling. She did not gasp. She did not declare anything dramatic. She took measurements, checked the corrosion pattern, and compared it to photographs she had brought in the tube. "This was never part of the marina display," she said at last. Vera leaned forward. "You are certain?" The display item was a reproduction donated for investor events. Pretty. Hollow. Safe to loan. Helena tapped the table near the sealed evidence bag, not touching it. "This is not that. This appears to be 19th century marine brass, possibly from a wreck site recorded off Harrow Key. It should not be in private hands." Keir, who had stayed near the wall, went still at the island name. Leif noticed. So did Vera. Helena continued, unaware or choosing not to care. "I would need lab confirmation, but if someone planted this in Sergeant Winslow's workspace, they may have done more than frame a local officer. They may have exposed a separate illegal salvage route." The room settled around that sentence. Blaine's trap had been meant to close a door. Instead, it had opened a second one. Leif looked down at his cracked watch. His thumb hovered near the damaged glass, then lowered without touching it. For the first time all day, the old habit felt too small for the size of the thing in front of them. Vera turned to Keir. "You recognized Harrow Key." "Old fog station," he said. "Closed years ago. Difficult landing in winter. Good place for people who do not want visitors." Rosalie's eyes sharpened. "Any private docks? One service pier if it has not rotted out." Leif thought of Miles's story. A skiff leaving after midnight. One small red light after it cleared the breakwater. Orin disappearing into a version of the town's silence. Vera saw the thought in his face. "Not tonight." He looked at her. "Do not make me say it twice," she said. Leif swallowed the argument before it could become something Blaine would have enjoyed. They returned to the marina just before dusk to secure the storage building and compare its access logs with Coast Guard departure notices. Snow had started again, lighter now, falling straight down in the absence of wind. The VIP slips glowed with clean lights. The silver meridian sat polished and quiet, still too awake. Keir checked his tablet near the service gate. His expression changed. Vera noticed first. "What?" "The silver meridian amended departure," Keir said. Leif felt Tiller's body tense beside him before the words finished. Keir looked from the tablet to the yacht. Original departure was tomorrow evening after weather review. New plan is dawn. 12 hours earlier. Maris turned toward the white vessel. Rosalie closed her sample case slowly. Vera said nothing for several seconds. Across the snow, the silver meridian's deck lights reflected in the black water, graceful and untouchable. No one moved on deck. No voices carried. Nothing about the yacht looked hurried. That made the change worse. Leif kept one hand on Tiller's leash and one hand open at his side. He was not allowed to run the case. He was not allowed to board the vessel. He was not allowed to act like the old panic in his chest was the same thing as proof. But he was allowed to stand there and see what the others saw. The window was closing. This time, he was not the only one watching it. Night settled over Frost Harbor without making the marina dark. The snow had stopped falling for a while, but the world remained white enough to hold light. Every covered yacht reflected the security lamps. Every dock rail gleamed under ice. The silver meridian waited in its VIP slip with her deck lights shining, and her departure moved to dawn, too clean, too quiet, too ready. Inside the old boatworks, Leif stood with his parka half-zipped and his badge clipped at his belt, though he had no patrol shift to justify either one. He had read the amended departure notice 3 times. He had listened to Keir Donovan explain the Coast Guard options. He had heard Vera's order not to approach the vessel alone. He knew every legal reason to wait for morning procedure, and still, the part of him shaped by last February kept whispering that waiting was how people disappeared. The memory came in pieces, never as a full scene. Fog against his windshield, a radio call broken by static, a boat horn somewhere in white distance. His own decision to move before the second unit arrived, because the tide window was closing. By the time help reached the coordinates, there had been only debris, cold water, and the knowledge that courage without patience could become another kind of harm. Leif picked up his flashlight from the workbench. Tiller watched from his blanket. "I know," Leif said, though the dog had made no sound. He clipped the leash to Tiller's collar. The German shepherd rose, stretched stiffly, and took 3 steps toward the bay door. Then he stopped. Leif opened the door. Cold air moved in, sharp with salt and snow. Tiller did not follow. Instead, the dog turned back into the boatworks and crossed to the small office desk, where Leif had left his phone beside a stack of reports. The screen lit up as if touched by the movement in the room. One missed call, Maribel. Tiller sat down beside the desk. Leif stood at the open door with the harbor in front of him and the dog behind him, and for a moment he felt absurdly angry. Not at Tiller, not at his sister, at the simple unfairness of a choice that should have been easy. A boat might leave. Evidence might vanish. An old man might still be somewhere beyond reach. The part of Leif that wanted to run toward the Silver Meridian did not feel reckless to him. It felt loyal. It felt necessary. But Tiller kept sitting beside the phone. The dog's amber eyes did not accuse him. That made it worse. Leif looked from the marina lights to the phone, then down at the cracked watch on his wrist. For nearly a year, he had told himself that carrying pain alone spared other people the weight of it. He had called isolation discipline. He had called silence protection. But standing there, he finally recognized the shape of the lie. Going alone would not protect Vera. It would not protect Maris. It would not protect Tiller. It would only make sure that if he failed, everyone else would be left trying to understand why he had not trusted them enough to call. Leif closed the bay door. Tiller lowered his head, as if the matter had been settled without ceremony. Leif picked up the phone. He did not call Maribel. Not yet. His voice was not ready for that kind of truth. But he did call Vera. She answered on the second ring. "If you are on that dock," she said, "turn around. I am in the boatworks." A pause. "Good," Vera said. "That is already better than I expected. I think we need to move before dawn. Together." This time she did not correct him. Within 40 minutes, the boatworks had become a temporary command room. Vera arrived first, hair tucked under a black knit cap, face set in the calm expression she used when worry had no permission to show. Keir came next with 2 Coast Guard personnel, boarding gear, and a tablet full of departure filings. Rosalie Bentham brought a compact evidence kit and a thermal transport reference sheet. Maris arrived last, not because she was late, but because she had stopped by the clinic to gather a muzzle, a medical lead, and a small kit in case Tiller or any animal evidence needed careful handling. Miles Gentry came on foot through the snow. He looked smaller without the marina lights behind him. His rust-orange maintenance jacket hung loose from his shoulders, and the key ring at his belt made a nervous sound with every step. For a second, he seemed ready to turn back before reaching the open door. Tiller stood. Miles stopped. "I am not good at this," he said. Vera looked at him. "At what?" "At saying things that get powerful men angry." "No one is asking for bravery as a personality," Vera said. "Only accuracy." Miles swallowed. His eyes went to Leif, then to Tiller. The skiff that left the service dock the night Oren disappeared. "I saw it come back near 4, mister. Yardley told me to log it as stormline inspection." Keir's fingers moved over his tablet. "Was there cargo?" "I did not look." Vera waited. Miles's face twisted with shame. "I made myself not look." 2 days later, Mr. Yardley told me to leave grocery bags near the old service pier on Harrow Quay if I wanted to keep my job. Canned soup, water jugs, batteries once. Maris went still. Leif felt his chest tighten. "How many times?" 4, maybe 5. Miles's key ring trembled. "I never saw Oren. I told myself maybe it was for some winter caretaker. I told myself a lot of things." Rosalie's voice remained even. "Did Yardley say why?" "He said some problems had to be held quiet until the marina expansion closed." Miles looked down. "He said one stubborn old man could ruin a whole town." There it was. Not a confession to every crime, not enough for an ending, but enough to change the shape of the night. Keir looked at Vera. Combined with amended departure, false logging, possible undeclared cargo, and a missing person lead tied to a maritime location, I can justify boarding before departure. Vera nodded once. Then we do it clean. The silver meridian looked larger from the dock below her. Blaine Yardley was waiting at the gangway in his black winter parka and polished boots, flanked by a tired-looking attorney in a camel coat who had clearly not expected to spend the night arguing in snow. "This is harassment," Blaine said before anyone greeted him. Keir held up his identification. Chief Petty Officer Donovan, Coast Guard boarding for documentation, safety review, and verification of declared cargo prior to departure. "My client has complied with every requirement," the attorney said. "Then this should be efficient." Blaine's eyes moved past Keir to Vera, then to Leif. "He is not supposed to be here," Vera answered before Leif could. "Sergeant Winslow is present as the reporting officer on the found animal case and a witness to related evidence. He is under my supervision." "Convenient. Legal," Keir said. Different word. The boarding did not happen like the scenes people imagined. No shouting, no rush, no dramatic search through luxury cabins. Keir moved by checklist. Vera documented. Rosalie noted storage conditions. Maris stayed near tiller, watching the dog's body more than the humans' faces. The upper decks showed nothing beyond wealth arranged for comfort. Covered seating, polished fixtures, sealed cabinets, a galley stocked for departure. But Tiller did not care about any of it. He moved reluctantly at first, then with growing tension toward the lower passage near the engine and heating systems. Leif kept the leash loose enough for information, short enough for control. At a narrow service door, Tiller stopped, his body lowered, the same way it had near the vent. Not panic this time. Something harder, a fear he had decided to walk through. Maris whispered, "Let him set the pace." Leif nodded. The compartment beyond held maintenance panels, bundled hoses, and a low hum from the yacht's auxiliary heat. Tiller nosed along the base of a cabinet, then pressed toward a section of flooring that looked no different from the rest. Keir crouched and ran his gloved fingers along the seam. "Panel," he said. The hidden space beneath was empty of living cargo, but not empty of use. Inside were collapsed insulated liners, straps with partial blue compass markings, battery clips, and several wrapped objects tucked into a side cavity. Helena Marchant was not there to identify them, but Rosalie photographed everything before anyone touched it. Blaine's attorney began speaking very quickly upstairs. Keir did not look up. "Secure the compartment." Tiller was not finished. The German Shepherd moved past the open panel toward a built-in chart table. He sniffed once, then scratched at the narrow wooden trim beneath it. Not wild, not frantic, purposeful. Leif crouched beside him. Here, Tiller touched the trim with his nose. Keir removed the piece carefully with a multi-tool. Behind it, folded tight enough to fit the gap, was a weather-stained scrap of chart paper. Vera opened it on the table. Harrow Key Fog Station had been circled in pencil. Beside the circle was a short note in cramped writing that did not belong to any official chart. "Keep supplied until transfer." Miles made a sound from the passage behind them. No one asked if he recognized the handwriting. His face had already answered. The crossing to Harrow Key began before sunrise. The Coast Guard boat cut through dark winter water under a sky slowly turning silver. Snow lay along the rails in hard ridges. The wind off the bay carried needles of cold against every exposed inch of skin. Leif stood near the stern with Tiller braced beside him in a working harness Keir had approved for safety. The dog did not tremble now. His eyes stayed fixed ahead, past the bow, past the black chop, toward an island still hidden in pale distance. Vera stood close enough that Leif did not have to mistake solitude for strength. "You did the right thing calling," she said. He watched the water. "Do not make it sound heroic." "I was going to make it sound professional. That may be worse." For the first time in days, Vera gave him something almost like a smile. Harrow Key rose from the water as a low shape of rock, snow, spruce, and abandoned utility structures. The old fog station stood near the eastern point, a square building with peeling white siding, boarded windows, and a rusted signal tower rising behind it like a question no one wanted answered. The service pier had not fully rotted away, but it had come close. Keir sent one of his crew ahead to test the landing. Vera coordinated with dispatch. Rosalie stayed ready with evidence bags. Maris remained on the boat with a medical kit until the building was cleared enough for her to approach. Leif and Tiller moved behind Keir, not in front. The station door was barred from the outside with a simple chain and a padlock. That detail quieted everyone. Keir photographed it before cutting the chain. Inside, the air smelled of coal dust, old fuel, damp wood, and human endurance. They found Orrin Bell Trowick in the back room near a small emergency stove that had burned out hours earlier. He was wrapped in 2 rough blankets, sitting half upright against a wall beneath a shelf of old canned supplies. A rain barrel had been dragged inside and fitted with a cracked funnel. A weak battery lamp glowed near his left hand. He was alive. For a second, no one moved. Then Maris came in, fast but controlled, crossing the room with the medical kit. Vera called for EMS coordination through Coast Guard relay. Keir checked the rest of the station. Rosalie photographed the supplies without stepping into Maris's path. Leif stayed near the doorway because his body wanted to rush forward and his mind knew better. Tiller did not wait for permission, but he did not charge. The German shepherd walked slowly across the room, each step careful on the old boards. Orrin's head turned at the sound. His face was thinner than the photograph on his boat, his white beard longer, his skin pale under the weathered red of a life spent outdoors. His eyes opened with effort. For a moment, he seemed to look through everyone. Then he saw the dog. "Tiller," he whispered. The sound broke something in the room without making it loud. Tiller gave one small wounded whine. He stopped just short of Orrin's knees, as if some part of him remembered that love could hurt a weakened body if it arrived too hard. Then he lowered his head and pressed his muzzle into Orrin's shaking hand. Orrin's fingers closed in the fur behind the notched ear. Leif looked away before the others could see his face clearly. Outside the boarded window, dawn touched the snow on Harrow Quay and made the whole ruined place briefly bright. The silver meridian, the marina, Blaine Yardley, the false reports, the polished lies, all of it seemed far away for one breath. In that room, there was only an old fisherman, a loyal dog, and the terrible mercy of being found before the world finished forgetting. Leif stood beside them and understood the lesson he had been resisting since the night Tiller came into the boatworks. Loyalty was not keeping someone close because losing them frightened you. Loyalty was helping them return, even if the place they belonged was not only beside you. By the time Frost Harbor learned that Orrin Bell Trowick was alive, the town had already begun rewriting itself. Not loudly. Small towns did not change in speeches. They changed in where people looked when a familiar truck passed. They changed in who stopped talking when a name was spoken. They changed in the difference between a rumor and a fact finally strong enough to stand in daylight. Orrin was taken from Harrow Quay by Coast Guard boat under a pale winter sky. He did not wave to anyone. He did not make himself into a symbol. He sat wrapped in a thermal blanket, one hand resting on Tiller's neck, his fingers buried behind the dog's notched ear, as if checking that the living world had not changed its mind. Tiller stayed pressed against him all the way back. Leif stood 3 feet away, and let that be true. That was harder than he expected. The first official hours after the rescue belonged to other people. Vera Lindholm took statements. Keir Donovan locked down the maritime side of the case with clean, steady precision. Rosalie Bentham coordinated with federal wildlife investigators over the heated transport liners found aboard the Silver Meridian. Helena Marchant confirmed that the brass housing planted in the boatworks matched a documented historical wreck site near Harrow Quay, turning Blaine Yardley's attempt to frame Leif into a doorway he had never meant to open. Miles Gentry gave his statement twice. The first time, his voice shook so badly that Vera stopped the recording and gave him a paper cup of water. The second time, he did not sound braver, only clearer. He described the service skiff, the bags left at the old pier, the instructions not to ask questions, the fear of losing his job, the father at home who needed nighttime oxygen. The way a man could convince himself he had done nothing wrong because he had not looked directly at the wrong thing. No one in the room comforted him. No one needed to punish him either. Truth did both jobs well enough. Blaine Yardley was not dragged through the marina in disgrace. There was no crowd gathered with phones raised, no dramatic shouting across the snow. That would have suited the version of Frost Harbor he had always sold to investors. Clean images, controlled reactions, a story managed for public consumption. Instead, he was taken into custody on the VIP dock in the quiet blue hour before evening. He wore his charcoal coat and black gloves. His burgundy scarf was knotted neatly, though the wind had begun to pull one end loose. Even then, he held himself like a man waiting for someone important to realize there had been a misunderstanding. Vera stood in front of him with 2 officers beside her. Leif watched from a distance near the old bait shed, Tiller beside him. Orrin had been taken to the clinic for evaluation, and the dog had stayed with him until Maris gently insisted the old man needed rest. Now Tiller stood close to Leif, but his head kept turning toward the road that led to the clinic. 2 loyalties in one body. Blaine saw Leif watching. For a moment, the marina manager's face tightened into something almost honest. Not guilt, not regret, offense. "You think this saves the town," Blaine called, his voice carrying across the frozen dock. "You think exposing every flaw makes this place stronger? Investors leave. Jobs vanish. Men like Trawick complain. But they do not pay the bills." Vera looked at him with no heat at all. "You do not save a town," she said, "by deciding which people are small enough to spend." Blaine's mouth opened, then closed. Vera continued, quieter. "And living things are not cargo because a rich man has a schedule." No one applauded. That made the words better. Blaine looked once toward the silver meridian, where Coast Guard tape crossed the gangway, and technicians moved with numbered bags under bright portable lights. The yacht looked less elegant now, not because it had changed, but because people finally knew where to look. As he was led away, Blaine kept his chin high. Leif found no satisfaction in it. That surprised him. For months after the fog rescue, he had imagined that if Blaine could be placed cleanly somewhere, Payne might obey the line and stay there. But watching Blaine leave did not repair Orrin's hunger, or Tiller's fear, or Miles's shame, or the unanswered envelope in the police department's files. It only stopped one man from continuing. Stopping harm mattered. It was not the same as healing. 3 days later, Captain Vera Lindholm called Leif into her office. The station had returned to its winter rhythms. Phones ringing, boots melting snow onto rubber mats, someone complaining about the coffee as if poor coffee were a civic emergency. Leif entered with his hat in one hand, and Tiller waiting in the hallway outside Vera's open door. Vera did not offer him the chair immediately. She read from a folder first, because mercy, from her, often came dressed as procedure. "The county review of the artifact complaint is moving in your favor," she said. "Preliminary analysis supports recent placement in the boatworks. Camera footage from the marina office appears edited. That will not be resolved today, but the accusation against you has lost most of its teeth." Leif nodded. "And before you decide silence is humility," Vera added. "That is good news." "It is." "You say that like someone reading a weather report. I am working on it." She closed the folder. "Internal review is still open." He looked at her. Vera held his gaze. "You stayed within the line when it mattered most. But earlier, you skirted edges. Photographs near the VIP slip, independent contact with Miles before we had him protected. Some of that was explainable. Some of it was not ideal. I understand, do you?" Leif looked through the open door at Tiller, who sat in the hall beside a dented filing cabinet, watching both exits as usual. "I do." Vera leaned back. Her ash-blonde hair caught the fluorescent light in a hard silver line. "I am recommending you return to harbor duty after evaluation and retraining on evidence procedure." He almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the words felt too ordinary for what they meant. "I am not saying you are fine," she said. "I know. I am saying you proved you can stop. That one found him." Leif looked down at the cracked watch on his wrist. He did not touch it. He only looked. The crack was still there. It would remain there. A damaged thing did not become undamaged because someone finally named the lesson, but it could still tell time. "Thank you," he said. Vera nodded once. "Do not make me regret being fair. I will try not to. Try harder than that." For the first time in a long while, the corner of Leif's mouth moved without feeling like a mistake. The marina changed more slowly than the case file. The VIP section was audited by people who wore dark coats and carried sealed folders. The security camera system was moved to independent storage after the town council learned how many convenient failures had gone unquestioned. The auxiliary storage building was emptied, cleaned under supervision, and marked for use as a winter inspection point shared by the town, Coast Guard, and wildlife officials. No one called it redemption. That would have been too easy. The old boatworks changed too. At first, a church group brought coffee urns because the heat inside still failed on cold mornings. Then 2 fishermen repaired the side window without asking permission. Someone found 3 folding tables in a school basement. Ruth Calderine donated mismatched mugs from the Gull and Lantern Diner, declaring that if men were going to stand around worrying about weather, they might as well do it with something warm in their hands. By the end of the month, the town boatworks had become a winter harbor room, not official enough to be ruined by committees, not polished enough to impress donors, just useful. Leif kept sleeping there less. That was one of the changes no one saw. Orrin did not return to his boat right away. He spent mornings in the diner near the window, a blanket over his knees, a bowl of chowder he complained about and finished anyway. His white beard had been trimmed by someone at the clinic, badly enough that he accused Maris of trying to make him look employable. Tiller visited him every day. At first, Leif brought the dog and stayed standing near the door. He told himself he was being respectful. Orrin let him believe that twice. On the 3rd visit, the old fisherman looked up from his coffee and said, "Sit down before the whole diner starts thinking you were raised by dock pilings." Leif sat. Tiller lay between their feet. Neither man said much for several minutes. The diner filled the silence with plates, low voices, and the hiss of the coffee machine. Snow drifted past the window in soft, bright fragments. Orrin's hand rested on Tiller's shoulder. Leif watched the dog's eyes close halfway under that familiar touch. "I can bring him by as long as you want," Leif said. Orrin looked at him. "That your way of returning him without saying it?" Leif did not answer quickly. Orrin gave a dry breath that might have been a laugh if it trusted itself more. "He was mine before all this. I know. And he is not a dock cleat." Leif looked down. "He is not something you unscrew from one place and bolt to another." Orrin's voice roughened, though not with anger. "When I was in that station, I kept thinking if he was alive, I hoped he had found a door with heat behind it. I did not specify whose door." Tiller opened his eyes when Leif shifted. The dog looked from Orrin to Leif, then back again. There was the answer, not simple and not clean. Tiller had not divided himself. He had widened. Somehow, after fear and ice and loss, the dog had made room for 2 kinds of home. Leif felt the old instinct to step away before wanting something made him visible. This time, he stayed seated. "What do you want?" he asked. Orrin scratched behind Tiller's notched ear. "Weekdays with you. Weekends near my place once I am steady enough. If he chooses different on a given day, we listen. That is not very official. I have survived official." Leif looked at him, then nodded. Tiller sighed, as if relieved that the humans had finally reached what dogs had known from the beginning. A week later, Frost Harbor woke under fresh snow and clear light. The boatworks door stood open. Inside, fishermen moved in and out with coffee, gloves, tide notes, and complaints about the price of diesel. Miles Gentry stood near the back table, repairing a heater under Ruth's supervision, which mostly meant she told him he was doing it wrong until it worked. No one had forgiven Miles all at once. Forgiveness in Frost Harbor behaved like spring ice. It softened slowly, and people tested it before trusting their weight to it. Leif stood outside beneath the repaired sign. Tiller sat beside him in a simple black harness, calm but watchful, his breath white in the cold. Across the marina, the silver meridian remained sealed and quiet. Beyond it, the harbor opened toward Harrow Key, where the fog station stood small against the morning. Leif's phone vibrated. He knew before he looked. Maribel. For a moment his thumb hovered over the screen. The old silence rose in him, patient and familiar, offering him the comfort of not having to explain. He could let it ring. He could call later. He could keep being the brother who made distance sound like protection. Tiller leaned lightly against his leg, not pushing. "Present," Leif answered. He heard his sister breathe in, surprised enough that she did not speak first. "Hey," he said. The word came out rough. On the other end of the line, Maribel was quiet. Then she said his name like she had been holding it carefully for a long time. Leif looked at the snow, the open boatworks, the harbor, the dog beside him, the people moving in and out of a building that had once been only a place to disappear. "I am still here," he said, his voice steadied by the end of it. "And if dinner is still an open invitation, I think I would like to come home." There was no music in the harbor, no sudden clearing of every wound, no promise that winter would not return. Only a door opened behind him, warm air moving out into the snow, and Tiller sitting close enough that Leif did not have to stand alone while he waited for his sister's answer. Sometimes healing does not arrive like a thunderclap. Sometimes it comes quietly, through an open door, a loyal dog at your side, a second chance to tell the truth, and the courage to answer a call you have avoided for too long. This story reminds us that being strong does not mean carrying every burden alone. Real strength may be found in letting someone stand beside you, in admitting that you still need home, and in understanding that love is not something we lose when we share it. If you are walking through a season of silence, may God give you one small sign of grace today, a voice that reaches out, a friend who stays, or a door that opens when you thought it was closed for good. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you are watching from, and if this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more stories of loyalty, justice, and hope.